I'm Andrea, a passionate DEI advocate and consultant on a mission. Join me in each episode as we celebrate diversity, ignite conversations, and craft workplaces and educational institutions where everyone thrives. This podcast is my commitment to making a meaningful impact on the world of diversity, equity, and inclusion. So are you ready? Let's get Diversifused. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Get Diversifused. I'm your host, Andrea Horton-Mericli, founder of Diversifuse DEI Consulting and a passionate DEI advocate and ally. This episode is all about breaking stereotypes and empowering people to take positive control in situations and relationships. My guest today is Paula Kramer. Paula has been stereotyped all her life, starting from the day she was born. Paula's pelvis, hips, and vertebrae were out of place. She was labeled as whiny and emotional by family and medical practitioners. When she was older, she married, but her husband died when their daughter was 8 months old. Paula's invisible out-of-place bones made her earning money difficult. Because her disability is invisible, social services staff and community members often labeled her as a liar and lazy. She eventually decided to use soft skill power strategies to take positive control in these situations. She overcame many of the stereotypes people had of her and positioned herself to attract unimagined success, going from a silenced voice to an international voice. Paula is now a soft skills mastermind, offering soft skill power strategies in online self-study courses. So welcome, Paula, to Get Diversifused. Thank you so much for being our guest today.
Thank you. And everywhere I go, when you see me online, I'm Paula M. Kramer.
Pardon me, I forgot your middle initial.
There are many Paula Kramers in the world, and I only get on the first page of Google as Paula M. So
So I will make sure to put that in the podcast description as Paula M. Kramer with a link to your LinkedIn profile and other contact information you agree to. So thank you for the correction. I apologize for forgetting your middle initial.
That's okay. I forgot to remind you.
But thank you so much for coming on. It's such a pleasure to have you. So why don't you tell the listeners a little bit about your story and how you overcame all the stereotypes and decided to create this soft skills mastermind to help others find their voice.
Right. My mother stereotyped me as a threat the day I was born. She had been raised to believe that she could prove herself a worthy woman only as the mother of a son. I was her second daughter instead of her first son. So I was a threat to her image as a worthy woman. And she tried to kill me twice. I remember them. I have memories of them. I was a baby for both of them, but I have found research that shows that babies as young as 3 months old can have visual memories of trauma. We don't have words in our baby brains, but we can remember the visuals of trauma, and I did. And I had to bury those memories. I couldn't put words to them in the first place. But then I had to not bury them so much as separate them into physical, mental, and emotional pieces. Clues, I call them the clues of my life. Clues to what my mother did to me that I didn't know how to put together. The out-of-place bones came from a boy pulling my chair out from under me in school. If you have any children in your life, please tell them to never pull a chair out from under anyone. Some people are instantly paralyzed. I'm lucky I can walk. I've lived with out-of-place bones for 61 years, but I can walk, and that's good. And I actually got the correct diagnosis for my spinal injury by using soft skills. Soft skills can include saying something to help other people. In 1996, I did a talk for a businesswomen's group in a city 2.5 hours from where I live. And I couldn't sit or stand normally. Sitting and standing normally when your pelvis, hips, and vertebrae are out of place is extremely painful.
Yes.
And I had one chiropractor in 1985 who sent me for an x-ray. When he got the x-ray back, he said, you have no S-curve in your spine. I don't know why he didn't go further to...
in layman's terms, to explain.
But he did. Yeah. So I had no S-curve. I went to this business meeting and I said ahead of time, I need a tall stool to lean on when I'm on stage. And then I brought a lumbar pillow with me for the dinner portion of this meeting. I did my speech, and afterwards, a nurse who was in the audience came up to me and gave me the correct diagnosis for my spinal injury. I was trying to help other people. I said that to help other people. I didn't expect to get the diagnosis for my injury. The diagnosis was that when I hit the floor, my spinal cord tendon, none of the people who got paid to see me ever mentioned my spinal cord. And I didn't know enough about the spine to ask, what about my spinal cord? She said the pain wasn't really bad at first, and it was never continuous, but it increased over time. It wasn't bad at first, so I just kept doing what hurt, but the pain started increasing. And in high school, the accident happened when I was 12. In high school, I couldn't sit in the seats, the rounded back seats in the auditorium at school. I had to sit in a folding chair in the aisle. So already I started having sitting problems in high school. And it just got worse and worse and worse. And so I was doing what hurt because I didn't want to stop, and that just made the pain worse. And I moved to a house out of town. I could walk to college. I started college at 35, and I drove, of course, because I had a child, but I walked around campus a lot. I walked to school. Then we moved out of the city to a village nearby, and I was driving more, and then I started having a lot of pain in my hips. So hips out of place, pelvis out of place. She told me that her husband knew an unusual chiropractic technique called neural organizational technique.
Oh, interesting.
Yes, it's. I don't know how much it's used now. People overpromised with neural organizational techniques, so it got a reputation. But it fixed my spine. She told me that he knew this technique and he could treat my spine and the pain in my spine. And I thought about it on the 2.5-hour drive home and decided that if all the things I've heard about this will fix your back, this one sounded like it would work. So I made an appointment to go see him. And the spinal cord, he told me, is attached to the spine by a muscle at the top of the neck and a muscle at the base of the spine. He said both of those muscles can stop. He took a laser pen and shined it on this muscle up here, released the tension in this muscle, and that released the tension in my spinal cord, and my pelvis just moved right back into place.
Interesting.
In 1 hour, he ended 33 years of pain in my spine. And my hips, my hips couldn't stay in place because my muscles had been doing the wrong things for 33 years. So I'm still in pain. I wear this because of the pain from my shoulders down. But for that, I was still stereotyped. I still have invisible pain. I learned to be more specific about what I said about my back. The beginning, I would say my back hurts. My back hurts. I learned to say my spine hurts. And then when I first started talking about out of place bones, people just couldn't figure it out. So then I started saying out of place hips, out of place pelvis, out of place vertebra. And so you get specific. When you get specific, then it's harder to dismiss when you get specific.
That's true.
And then, of course, my husband died when our daughter was 8 months old, and with an invisible pain, I was just this horrible person taking money out of people's pockets.
Another stereotype right there.
Another stereotype. Right. In fact, I started writing letters to the editor of our local newspaper because of all the stereotypes I heard about single mothers. And I was a single mother living in poverty. I got Social Security because my husband died, but he died young, so it wasn't much. We were getting food stamps, rental assistance, Medicaid. And I knew a lot of other single mothers, and we were all struggling. So I started writing letters to the editor about poverty, about food stamps, and I just lost where I was going. Oh, what
okay.
is stereotype? Oh, yeah.
Yes.
What is stereotype? A friend of mine was in a babysitting co-op, and she went to a meeting one day where one of the other women asked, "Does anyone here know Paula Kramer?" My friend said, "Yes, I know Paula." The woman asked my friend, "Is she fat and does she sit in front of the television set all day eating potato chips?"
Oh my
That's the
goodness.
kind of stereotype
Yep.
mothers trying to feed their children faced, and probably still face.
They do. I've worked in social services up until a couple years ago, and I mean, another stereotype is, oh, these women just keep having kids just so they can stay on welfare, and that's not true. It's not true. And maybe for a small maybe, but most of almost everybody, it's not true. It's like the few have always ruined it for the many, and that's what people zone in on. And it's a shame that these stereotypes happen. Like, my mother was a single mother as well after my parents got divorced, and raising 3 kids, it was hard in a border town. And I don't know how she did it, but she did. She went to school, back to school. She purchased a not an expensive house, but she was able to purchase a house. She really managed the finances well, but I did not realize how poor we were until I became an adult. And I mean, children and society don't realize how much single mothers work hard to support their families and try to improve themselves.
Right. And
so kudos to you.
Your mother was probably stereotyped as being the reason for it was her fault.
Yeah. And her being a Mexican American as well, probably added to the stereotype.
Probably. Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Well, that's the basic of my life story.
Well, thank you so much for sharing that. I mean, you've overcome a lot. I never would have. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Go ahead. No, I have.
I was going to say, I never would have thought that pulling a chair out from a child could do so much damage. But as you were talking, I was like, of course, it's like falling off on a bike or falling from a cliff and landing, sitting down like that on your coccyx, your tailbone. And I mean, it could cause all sorts of damage. I mean, no damage to, all sorts of damage.
Right.
So,
all sorts of damage. Paralysis. Some people.
Yeah.
I'm lucky. And the boy who pulled the chair out from under me had a crush on me and was trying to get my attention. He was not taught as a boy to express his feelings. The only way he thought he could get my attention was by doing something to hurt me in some way, to surprise me or something. Get my attention in a way that I couldn't ignore.
And that I've heard that a lot before, where like little boys will pull the ponytails of little girls because they're trying to get their attention, and they don't know how to other ways to get it.
They don't. They're not taught to, because boys aren't supposed to. Boys are supposed to be not supposed to express their feelings.
Historically, yes, and I'm hoping that society is now changing, because that is another stereotype right there. Like, boys are not supposed to cry. Boys are not supposed to be emotional, and we're all humans, and we all have to express our emotions. If we don't, we're going to express them the incorrect way, or we're going to eventually it's all going to build up and we're going to explode if they're negative emotions and have a nervous breakdown. So thank you so much for sharing your story. That is very motivational and impactful, how you found your voice. So how do you define positive control in the context of small spaces, pardon me, of situations and relationships? And what are some strategies that you found for cultivating them?
Well, I have a video, on my website where I have my soft skills study courses, I have 3 video lessons for free. And one of them illustrates this perfectly. It's 3 behavior transforming steps. I had started learning about DISC behavior styles. Have you heard of DISC behavior styles? D-I-S-C.
Oh, DISC. Yes. Sorry. Yes. Mm-hmm. I thought you were talking about the spine disc. Sorry. No. The assessments. Yes.
we were on the spine, and the spine has DISC. No, DISC behaviors. And for anyone who hasn't heard about them, I have a website called smilesparksuccess.com where I present all kinds of information about DISC behavior styles and Springer guiding values, because the basic soft skills I have found come from satisfying DISC behavior style needs and Springer guiding value passions. And this is a real world example of satisfying DISC behavior styles needs. A woman came to me and said she wasn't sure what she was going to do because a woman she didn't get along with in her company was going to be working with her in her department, and she didn't know how she was going to handle it. Because I knew her, I knew she was a high influence behavior style. That's what I am, an influence behavior style. And so I asked her some questions about the other person, and she said what she told me meant that the other person was a conscientiousness behavior style, the opposite behavior style. They were opposites. This is why they didn't get along. But I told the woman, my acquaintance, to do 3 things. I said, conscientious people need some control of their surroundings. So figure out a way to give her control of something in your office. I said, then tell them what you like about what they're doing with their control, what they're controlling, and then ask about their thoughts, because conscientious people want others to be interested in their thoughts. So my acquaintance was just the same level as coworker, so she didn't have much control of anything, but she said, told the conscientious coworker that she could be in charge of the files. And then she told her what she liked about how she was managing the files, and she asked her about her thoughts. And the relationship changed. And the other person began figuring out what she could do to work with the influence person. So 3 very simple things. It actually worked better than I expected. And I didn't understand it for about 10 years. I talked to this woman in 2000. I remember because we were at a big special event. It was in 2000. I talked to her in 2000. Around 2010, I was doing research into groups that are successful at transforming behavior. And it dawned on me that every single one of them satisfied physical, mental, and emotional needs all at the same time. And that's what my advice did. Managing the files was physical control of the environment. Hearing what the influence person liked about the files satisfied the conscientiousness person emotionally. And the influence person asking about the conscientiousness person's, what a word, thoughts, satisfied her mentally. Physical, mental, emotional satisfaction. And they were all simple. And they were all based on soft skills. You can do this. What are your thoughts? This is what I like. All simple soft skills.
I love that. Soft skills. I love that soft skills are becoming a lot more important than the hard skills, because a lot more employers are jumping on the bandwagon or on board, whatever expression you want to use, to say, hey, soft skills are a lot more difficult to teach than the hard skills. We can always train somebody to do the job. Right. So a lot of employers in their job descriptions, when they're hiring, they are making some of the higher education requirements optional. And like they might say high school diploma with 10 years experience, associate's degree with 7 years experience, bachelor's degree with 3 years experience. It gets lower, or a combination of things of education and experience will be considered, because they realize how important soft skills are as compared to the hard skills. And
Right. Mhm.
and for the younger generation, they're starting to learn that, get exposed to that too. And unfortunately for the younger generation, it's a technological society. They grew up with computers, they grew up with games, online gaming. And so that interaction has lessened, that the in-person social interactions have lessened. And it's not that it's more difficult for the young generation. I'm not saying that, but
Right.
they weren't exposed to as much as we were when we were
No,
kids and
they
growing
weren't.
up.
No, they
And,
weren't. No,
and
they weren't.
so, yeah, so those social cues, some of them may not understand it right away, or understand why they have to act a certain way in this situation as compared to this situation, about reading the audience,
Mhm.
whoever's in the room. And
Right.
so I love that you have this soft skills mastermind, because it's just so important.
It's
So
important.
important.
It is
And
important.
hmm and
And
when go ahead.
I was in one of the questions you sent me, you wanted to ask about
Yeah.
positioning yourself. How
hmm
soft skills can position you. Somewhere buried in my files, I have an article about uh, two executives who went to lunch, and a man and a woman, and the man was the woman's boss, but she was an
okay.
executive too. They went to a nice restaurant. During the lunch, the waiter spilled wine on
Mm.
the woman's clothes. She did not yell. She did not curse. She was soft spoken about it, and she got the waiter laughing. The boss said, "Well, I can trust her to do anything now because I saw how she handled this."
hmm
She positioned herself for success. Think that boss is going to promote her? Of course, because he wants
hmm
somebody who can handle anything.
Yep. Yep. Yeah, the way we react to certain situations is very important. It's
Right.
it's like the implicit bias tests, to
Uh-huh.
learn to do self-assessments on yourself, to see where you tend to lean towards when it comes to interacting with certain groups, or how you think about certain groups. And it's very important to do that, to self-assess, because when you do interact with those groups, you can pause before you speak, before you react. And
Mhm.
it's the same in those situations, with when things don't go the way you thought they would, or weren't the
Right.
way they should have gone. Like
Right. Right.
with the
Right.
wine thing, I remember spilling I was a waitress in college, and I worked in a Mexican restaurant, and the plate was really greasy. It had all enchiladas and stuff on it, and I, of all the people to spill the red enchilada plate on, the boss's wife, the owner's wife. I was mortified, so mortified. I was ready to pack up and go,
Of
be
course.
escorted off the property. But just like your example, that red sauce never came off, but
Of course not.
just like your example, she was very composed. She understood the situation. She could see how badly I felt, and with this accident, and she understood accidents happen. It wasn't done
Mhm.
intentionally, and it's done and over. Get over it.
Right. And so this was in the restaurant when other patrons were there eating.
Yeah,
So then all those bystanders saw a reason to keep coming back to that restaurant.
exactly, exactly. Yep. And yeah, that's great PR and customer service right there. Not done by
Right.
me, but done by her.
By her, right? She did it, but she
Yep.
invited all those patrons to come back.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Exactly. And yeah, so yeah, the way we react to situations, whether you're, for the lack of better words, the perpetrator, or the one being having the act done upon you, um, it's how
Right.
you react. And
How you react.
um,
Right.
yeah, so and that's all soft skills.
It's
And
all soft
because
skills.
yeah, when you're a leader, you have to be understanding of your team who's learning
Right.
and is going to make mistakes and are going to make mistakes. Is are I don't know what the
It's
grammatical
our
correct.
both of them. We use both
So
of
yeah,
them.
we do. So, can you share some examples of soft skill power strategies that our listeners today can apply in their own lives so they can try to take some positive control and overcome challenges they may be facing or may face in the future?
Right. Well, I want to start out with how I survived my childhood. I I was terrified of my mother. My mother was a narcissist who was emotionally abusive to everyone, including my father, who really loved my mother. So this abuse was hard on him, and he became a quiet alcoholic. He would go off to his job during the day, come back, and drink 2 or 3 quarts of beer to bury his
Oh,
stress. But they can't stay buried forever, those feelings, and he would erupt in rages that could last for days or for hours or days. During one of those rages, he unintentionally broke my older sister's arm. So I was
oh,
terrified of my mother. I was afraid of my father's rages. And I developed soft skills strategies as a child to reach out to adults outside of my family. And I felt safe for the first time with an adult, with my first second grade teacher. She got married during the year and moved away. I have no memory of the second grade teacher because she wasn't like my first. And then when I was 11, I said something to the principal. This was a Catholic elementary school with Sister Vianney. I said something to her that she liked so much that she started inviting me to her office for conversations. I don't remember what I said to her because it wasn't momentous to me.
yeah.
Conversations in her office were momentous. I remember sitting across the desk for her and talking and laughing. It was just wonderful. So from age 11 on, I have felt equal to any person in any room because I had equal conversations with the most powerful person in my elementary school.
Wow.
And I got to that point because I listened as a child. I listened to positive words I could trust, meaning someone would say something positive to me, but then not ask me for anything. I spoke
Mm.
positive words other people could trust, and I said
Mhm.
positive words to myself. So the first small spaces I took control of were my ears and my mouth. You start there. You never, ever, ever say anything negative to yourself. If I do
Mhm.
something stupid, I say, that was stupid. I don't tell myself you're stupid because I'm not stupid. I'm a
Mhm.
smart person who sometimes does stupid things because everybody
We all
sometimes
do. We
does
all do.
stupid
Yeah.
things. It's
Yeah.
humanity. So you start there. And
That's true.
then I, I also say that I I probably because I started talking to adults as a child, I try to start conversations wherever I go. I've been doing this for years. Wherever I go, if I can start a conversation, if someone's willing to talk to me, I'll talk. And I now say one of the reasons I became an international voice is because I know how to talk to people. I now say chit-chatting with a wide variety of people in a wide
Mhm.
variety of situations cultivates the confidence to create connections with particular people in particular situations for career conversations. I became an international voice, an audience favorite on my 72nd birthday on an international podcast. Yes.
What? I did not realize I thought I did not realize you were or past 70. I was like you,
Nobody gets my age. Nobody. But I like saying my age because I like people to know I'm doing this in my 70s.
that's
I'm
awesome.
73 now. I mean, I was able to approach this podcast host because I've done so much chit chatting. And I said, I on my on my course's website, I have 14 blog posts with strategies people can use with themselves. I was lucky enough to have Sister Vianney make me feel equal at age 11. Most people, especially women, don't have that, and they feel the imposter syndrome. When I first
Mhm.
heard the phrase imposter syndrome, I had to look it up because I've never felt like an imposter anywhere. And so
Wow.
I have these blog posts listing all kinds of strategies from all kinds of resources for people to use with themselves so that they feel that they deserve the success my soft skill strategies will attract when they use them.
Awesome.
And so I wanted to, it's Sexy Cool Lounge. I listened to one podcast of Sexy Cool Lounge and decided I want to be on his show. And I want him to be a blog. So I have a blog post that's just for him. I have blog posts for that. I have blog posts just about Art of Manliness podcasts. And I approached Sexy Cool Lounge, host Jimmy IV. I sent him an email. I said, this is what I'm doing. I'd like to list your episodes, appropriate episodes in this blog post. And I'd also like to be on the show.
Hey, the worst he can say is no, right?
Right.
Or not answer.
Actually, he sent me an email the next day, said, let's have a Zoom meeting and talk about this. During that Zoom meeting, he actually said twice that my email made him feel giddy. It was so exciting to him that I approached him that he was giddy. And so it just so happened he wanted to do this was a Friday. He wanted to do the interview on Sunday, and Sunday was my 72nd birthday. I told him that. He said, you announced that on the show. So I did the show on my 72nd birthday.
That is
so
awesome.
That's 72. And afterwards, he later told me that afterwards, people called me up, people talked to me, people emailed me and asked, when are you having her on again? So already done my second interview, and I'm doing my third in the summer. And it's because I've been practicing for decades how to talk to people. So first you talk to yourself and you listen to podcasts, and then you talk to other people, a wide variety of people, a wide variety of situations. And if you don't know how to start talking, on my Facebook page and on my LinkedIn page, I write up my conversations. I started writing about them because I realized most people don't know how to start conversations when they go out in the world. So I write up examples of my conversations. And oddly enough, the things that can happen. I saw a woman in a store who looked familiar. I approached her. She said, you probably knew my sister because she worked at the university. And that's where I had seen her, the university. So it was a twin sister who was deceased. But I talked to her, and this woman suddenly started talking about a woman who had been in the administration at the university in a special position. She said she was a prostitute and she slept with the chancellor to get the job. It just so happens that I had done a special project with that woman as a graduate student. And so here's this woman using ugly gossip. I call gossip good.
Calling her a prostitute. Yeah.
Prostitute, right. And I was so astonished at what you said. This is 30 years later. 30 years later. She's calling this woman a prostitute. I was so astonished. I couldn't gather my wits together to figure out what to say. So afterwards, I was in the project with another student, another grad student. Worked with this professor. She wasn't exactly a professor then, but she was a advisor to the chancellor. And we worked with her. We approached her, and she said, "Sure." We did this independent study project, and it was actually about men and women in cross-gender roles. So we were looking at the stereotypes about men and women in cross-gender roles. And I asked her, how did she get that job? And because she had been on the committee that hired her, she had been recruited. The chancellor said, approach this woman and see if she'll work with us. So the university recruited her. A recruiting committee contacted her, interviewed her, and then said, we'll hire her. No prostitution involved. So now I know how this procedure works. So if anybody ever stereotypes her again, I will say, oh, she was recruited. When did she sleep with the chancellor?
Yeah. She didn't even know him.
She didn't know him.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, I find sometimes women tend to be more about the gossip and
the bad and ugly things. Yes.
Yeah,
yes.
unfortunately. It's women against women. Yeah.
Right. I want to say to that, think about the words you put into men's ears, because any words you put into men's ears can come out of their mouths about you.
That's true. That's true.
Out of men's mouths about you.
Mm-hmm. That's true. I want to backtrack a little bit to what you were saying a little bit before about the self-talk.
Right.
I'm so glad you mentioned that, actually, because more, I think it tends to be more so women, as you said, than our male counterparts, who have a lot of negative self-talk. They put themselves down a lot, as you said. Oh, I'm stupid. Instead of saying that, say, oh, that was stupid. What was I thinking? Because everybody makes mistakes. Everybody sometimes acts before they think through a process, and then realize, like, oh, wait, why did I do that?
Right.
But but the self-talk is so important, because when you have positive self-talk, positive mantras, your confidence, your self-confidence and self-esteem start to increase. And that's why you're able, at least in my opinion, you're able to step out of your comfort zone and start talking to other people. And that's where networking comes into play.
Right.
And it's so important, not just for personal reasons, but for professional reasons as well. As you had said, it helps with your career and growth, and who, you never know who you're going to talk to and who you're going to bump into, who you're going to meet. Yeah. And so these positive situations and conversations are so important, because if you don't want them to be on the negative side, because you don't want to burn bridges. As we just said, you never know who you're going to be meeting.
No, right. Oh, and I have a story about that. I was working at I had trouble earning money until I got the correct diagnosis for my spinal injury, and then I was 45 years old, and so not going to get any big job at 45. So I started doing.
You can.
No, I was still in pain.
I see. Okay. Yes.
I was still in pain. I could start working again, but I was still in pain. So I did get a job. Got a job with a seasonal catalog company where I could set my own hours and with just my back could do. And there was a supervisor there who insulted. We were order takers to customer service representatives. I went from order taker to customer service rep quickly. She would insult us. She just went out of her way to insult us. And probably the second year I worked there, I had enough, and I wrote a letter to the human resources department and said, she needs to stop insulting people. I didn't know it at the time, but someone else wrote a letter to HR and said, she shouldn't talk to people. The other person said she just shouldn't talk to people. That's how bad she was. Well, of course, 2 letters means HR has to talk to her. And
that's good.
Year, yes, that's good. So the next year or later that year, they talked to her, and the other person left the company. So it was just me for her to be angry at. She was angry at me, and I knew she was angry at me.
They didn't keep you anonymous?
No.
Well, I love how HR policies today would keep you the person anonymous.
This was in 96. It was a terrible company. The company was terrible. So she had extreme stress on her. She was insulting because of the stress that was on her. But I knew about disc behavior styles, and I knew about Springer guiding values, which you'll read about at smilesmarksuccess.com. So I knew how to talk to her, and I knew when to talk to her. So she was a dominant behavior style. She needed to be in control. So when there was something I knew needed to be done, I went to her and said, this needs to be done. And then when there was something, a problem, she had a position guiding value. First guiding value was position, which means a chain of command was important to her. And so when there was a chain of command issue that I could take to her, I went right to her. And I kept doing that. It took months, but I eventually got her laughing with me. She left the company before I did. Years later, I needed something from a nonprofit. I called up the nonprofit, and who answers the phone? That supervisor. And my first reaction was, I'm so glad you got a better job, sincerely, because I knew her behavior came from the stress of her position in that corporation. And because I had gotten her to laughing when she was still at the job, and because I was sincere, she got me more than what I asked for.
That's awesome.
You just never know.
You never know. And I love that you knew why she was stressed and why she was acting that way. And it's very important for people to, when others are acting a certain way, acting out a certain way, maybe taking out their frustrations on you, or just walking in angry, whether it's a client or a student or a coworker or a boss, it's important not to judge right away,
It's important to
because
know.
and assume the worst, because you don't know what they experienced right before they walked through that door. And so it's important to pause and interact with them on a human-centered on a human-centered approach in conversation, because and try not to take it personally. It's really hard to not take it personally, but yeah, it's so important because when they see that you're actually listening, no matter who it is, what level they're at, and you're not counteracting on their aggression, then, and it may not be instant, as you said, it took a couple months. They'll start to realize that you are, you're coming to them as a human, and you can deal, you're not taking things personally. I can't find the right phrase. I'm looking for a certain phrase, but it's not coming to me. But it starts to break down that wall, and on the that invisible wall.
They have to be able to believe your sincerity.
Exactly.
They have to have enough time to believe you're sincere. And once they know you're sincere, you can get more than you, and you can never assume that someone will never come back into your life.
Exactly.
Because anything can happen.
Yep. And it doesn't even necessarily have to be them. It could be their partner or their best friend or somebody that they may have spoken with outside of work. And so you never know that how all those connections, how everybody's connected. Just like on LinkedIn, it's like, oh, you're my first connection, and then, oh, so-and-so, we know, oh my gosh, that's a second connection of ours.
Well, so you should. This leads me into a study I found, that this happens to be true for me. There's resources that show, studies that show, that the best person to get you a job for you is the person who lives in your neighborhood but not on your block. And that's exactly what happened to me. I got a good job from someone who lives in my neighborhood but not on my block. And I had gone out of my way to help her. She was a mother who had little children while doing some work. And when my grandchildren were here, I often took all the kids to the park so she could do what she wanted to do. And then she recommended me for this job out of the blue, years after our children were older. Wow. She just recommended me for this job. And so because I was nice to her, and because I helped her when she needed help, I didn't know this job was there until she recommended me for it.
Yeah, and that's the thing, as we were saying, you never know what the future is going to hold. And so we should never act on any stereotypes or assumptions.
Never act on stereotypes.
Yeah. And because anytime that happens, it's not going to be the chances of it being a positive outcome decline. So, and to me, it's very important. And this is where my Diversifuse DEI consultant comes in. It's very important to treat people not just as you want to be treated, but as they want to be treated. We're all humans. We all want to be accepted and valued and heard, and for what we can bring to the table, for who we are authentically. And it's just so important. So all these stereotypes, I mean,
I know.
Yeah.
And to the audience, you have more stereotypes facing you every time you walk out your door than you realize. On my soft skill strategy courses website are the links to my 5 blog posts about listing stereotypes. I have collected more than 1,000 stereotypes for these 5 blog posts. That's a lot of stereotypes, stereotypes in all kinds of situations. The stereotypes about people in general, workplaces, romance, ethnic, national and racial identities, and poverty. So you're in there in more than one.
Oh, yeah.
And so you could have more. I have more than 100 stereotypes about me. So I listed them, and I have more than 100.
That's where intersectionality comes into play in the diversity realm. We all identify as more than one under one category.
Right.
Yeah. And and it's important for workplaces and organizations and schools and the community at large to understand that we're complex creatures, and nobody fits one mold.
Nobody does.
Nobody should.
Nobody should. Yeah. And for anyone who's interested, I also wrote a blog post listing everything white supremacists would have to give up if they wanted to live truly white lives, purely white lives. And it's most of everything they do.
Yeah.
Well, just coffee. Coffee comes from Arabs.
And Latin America.
Paper comes from the Chinese. Gunpowder comes from the Chinese. Vanilla comes from Native Indians in Mexico. Potato chips, a half black, half Native American cook invented potato chips. You don't want black Native American. You have to stop eating potato chips. And heart surgery. If you want to live a purely white life, no heart surgery for you or anyone in your family, because heart surgery exists because of a man named Vivian Thomas, who has a female name, Fivien Thomas, who had only a high school education, was working after high school as a carpenter to save money to go to medical school. This was in the late 20s. In 1929, he lost all of his money in the crash.
Oh.
In 1930, he applied to the surgical research lab of Dr. Alfred Blaylock, a white surgeon who was about 30 years old. Vivian Thomas at the time was 19. So he was a black male teenager, what many whites today see immediately as a threat. But Dr. Blaylock, the white Dr. Blaylock, listened to Vivian, talked to him, and saw way beyond Vivian's physical features. Within 2 weeks, Vivian Thomas was doing surgical tests on dogs and developed techniques. One of my favorite things about this is that we also have a woman who is deaf. They started out in Tennessee, at the University in Tennessee. Then Blaylock wanted to go to a hospital in Detroit. Detroit wouldn't take him because Blaylock insisted on bringing Vivian Thomas with him. So they went to Johns Hopkins in Baltimore, where Helen Taussig was a pediatric cardiologist. She was deaf. She couldn't listen to babies' heartbeats. She felt their heartbeats with her fingertips. And yes. So a white man, a black man, and a deaf woman. She went to heart surgery.
Wow, that's awesome. That's a very inspiring story, actually, and a story that should break down all stereotypes.
Right. For heart surgery. They brought heart surgery to the world. She was dealing with babies who had the blue baby syndrome, where the artery for the heart was rerouted to the lungs, and the artery for the lungs is rerouted to the heart. So babies turned blue because they weren't getting enough oxygen. So Dr. Taussig went to Dr. Blaylock and said, "Could you develop heart surgery for this?" And Dr. Blaylock gave it to Vivian Thomas to do. And Vivian Thomas developed the techniques for heart surgery and some of the instruments that are still in use today. And when they were ready to do the surgery, Vivian Thomas stood on a stool. Dr. Blaylock had to do the surgery because he was a surgeon. Vivian Thomas stood on a stool looking over Dr. Blaylock's shoulder, telling him what to do. Because Dr. Blaylock didn't know what to do, Vivian Thomas knew what to do. And the surgery was successful. Doctors from around the world started coming to Baltimore to learn surgery, and they learned it from Vivian Thomas. He taught them the surgical techniques for surgery. And so anybody in the world who wants heart surgery has to thank Black male teenager Vivian Thomas for applying to Dr. Blaylock's surgical research lab, and to thank Dr. Blaylock for seeing beyond Vivian Thomas's age and skin.
Yeah, that is, wow. That's a wonderful story. It's a true story. So it's like, wow.
There's millions of people who are alive today because of a Black male teenager. And a deaf doctor, a deaf female doctor.
Yeah. And how many babies just have been able to live beyond a couple weeks or a few months. And it's like, wow, that's amazing. So, as we end our podcast, because I want to be cognizant of your time, how can people get hold of? So you did say your website, smilesparksuccess.com. I will be putting. Did I say that correctly? SmileSpark Success.
That is correct. That's where you get all kinds of free information about disc behavior styles and Springer guiding values. The courses are at softskillsstrategycourses.com with that list of links for the blog posts and the blog posts for the stereotype blog posts and the blog posts for self-talk with yourself, strategies to use with yourself. Those two. If you want to email me, it's paula@speakingfromtriumph.com. I have lots of websites.
Speaking for Triumph?
Speaking from Triumph.
Speaking
from Triumph. Speakingfromtriumph.com. Paula M. I want to give the self-talk I recommend for people who didn't have Sister Vianney in their lives to make them feel equal 11 years old. Any room you enter with other people is a room full of human beings. We are all equal in humanity. Anytime you walk into a room, remind yourself that you are equal to every person in that room in humanity. And when you get that feeling into your soul, it opens doors for you to feel equal in other ways. But we are all equal in humanity. It doesn't matter who they are, what rank they are, how much money they have. We are all equal in humanity.
Yes, I cannot agree with that more. So yes, I love that. So I'm gonna actually type that down. I'm gonna because I love that. So they can contact you through your email, paula@speakingfortrump.com. Get a hold of your courses and blog posts at softskillsstrategycourses.com, and then also go to your smilesparksuccess.com for more information, and they can reach out to you for speaking events as well.
And when part of soft skills is saying what you need. And so when you go to smilesparksuccess.com and identify your behavior style blend, I tell you how I give you resources for identifying your behavior style blend and your guiding value blend. When you know those, you can say, this is what I need because this is who I am. And I recognize what you need because this is who you are. Those are awesome.
And that's very important because people always say, oh, she or he's type A. I'm not, they're very controlling.
Right.
You can still work with them. So find your personality type and so you can.
Right. And sometimes soft skills are nonverbal skills. There are two behavior styles, the conscientiousness and the dominance, who do not want you to touch them unless they touch you first. So if you touch them when they have not invited touch, you could ruin your relationship with them because you violated their physical need.
And I'm so glad you brought that up also, because there are some people who are very hypersensitive to that. And because of that hypersensitivity, it could be taken as a type of harassment, an unintentional harassment.
Unintentional.
So
Right.
on the touchers part, because
Right.
like as a former teacher, like I would always lean in and put my hand on the shoulder like of my student, and it's like, you can't do that because you don't know. You have to
Right. You can't
stop
do
and
that.
think
No,
before. Yeah.
no.
So yeah.
No, and in my course on career advancement up, career advancement down, I talk about backlash bewares for each behavior style and each guiding value. There are things we do naturally that will invite backlash from other people unintentionally.
Yeah.
So when we're aware of them, we can temper them, still be who we are, but temper them to take into account what the other person needs.
Yep. Yeah, because you have the touchers and the huggers like me, and you
Right,
have
right,
those that
right,
that like you said, will it want to invite you in first to their
right,
personal space,
right,
and
right, mhm,
so we have to be cognizant of that. So
right.
so I'll be putting your information, Paula, on a slide at the end of the webinar today when I do launch it. This
Okay.
post will be launched on the first week of April, and first Thursday in April. And so listeners, just keep an eye out for that. Let's talk about some key takeaways. So we talked about empowering personal agency. We explored some strategies for taking positive control in the small spaces of situations and relationships, overcoming stereotypes, and positioning oneself for success through soft skill power strategies. We talked about challenging stereotypes. We reflected on the impact of stereotypes on individuals' lives and livelihoods, and discovered ways to challenge and overcome societal biases through resilience and perseverance. And we talked about Paula's wonderful soft skill mastery and how important mastering soft skills is, and gaining insights into the importance of the soft skills in navigating personal and professional challenges, and learning how mastering these skills can lead to personal growth and achievement. Some possible next steps for our listeners: reflect on personal experiences of stereotypes and biases and identify areas where positive control can be exerted. So as we had mentioned before, self-assess. I'll put the Harvard implicit bias assessments on a resource slide for you, and in the summary of today's podcast as well. Another possible step was explore soft skill development opportunities, such as online courses, as Paula's wonderful soft skill mastery classes, or workshops, and so you can enhance your personal agency and resilience. Engage in dialogue with others. As Paula said, we're all humans, right? And so much can be gained from conversation. So engage in dialogue with others about the impact of stereotypes and biases in their lives and communities, and work towards fostering understanding and empathy. Empathy is so important. And take inspiration from Paula's journey from birth to now, and apply soft skill power strategies to navigate challenges and pursue personal and professional goals. So is there anything you want to add to those, Paula?
You did a good job of covering it.
Sorry to put you on the spot there.
No, you have to start with yourself. If I could say positive things to myself with the mother who wanted me dead, everything who says toxic words to me, the only day of the year I knew she wouldn't say toxic words to me was Christmas Day. So if I could survive that and still say positive things to myself, you can too. You just say positive words and listen to positive words you can trust, and speak positive words you can trust, because when you speak positive words you can trust, then you attract unimagined successes.
It's true. I'm going to put
and you think about the bystanders, like I talked about the bystanders in the restaurant where you spilled on the owner's wife. Those bystanders, they're bystanders in our lives, have more impact than we realize. And so you want to always invite the bystanders, even when you have to deal with someone who's never going to be nice to you, never going to get you. If you use soft skills with them, the bystanders who it matters to will pay attention. And if they have the opportunity to do something for you, they will. You want to invite unimagined success by putting out soft skill, positive power in the world. It will come to you.
I agree. Well, thank you so much, Paula, for being our guest today on Get Diversifused. Listeners, as I said, this podcast is going to be airing in April. So by the time you're listening, it's April. So I will, all the key takeaways and possible next steps for y'all will be posted in this summary. So stay tuned for our next episode. And as always, feel free to put comments and suggestions on other topics you'd like to hear on our podcast. Thanks, everybody. Now go out there and make a difference. And as always, for more strategies on building inclusive workplaces and communities, check out Diversifuse. We're here to guide you on your DEI journey. Make sure to visit our website at diversifused.com and follow us on social media for the latest happenings, blog posts, tips, and events.